Beloved brothers and sisters, we all know that old people like to tell stories. Or do we not know? And sometimes the same story doesn't really correspond to what it was told previously. And I think the older one gets, the longer the story becomes. Many years ago, a book had been published, which was called Once Upon a Time. This book is in English and in Dutch, and even in German. Has anybody bought it? Not everybody, okay. Just 50%. Okay. It is available in the bookshop. If you are interested, and in order to get you to be interested, I am going to read a few passages, hoping that you will take the trouble to purchase it. Now, why am I so longing for you to purchase it? Because, well, for one reason, there are huge stocks that have been lying there for ages, and for some reason or other, nobody takes the trouble to promote it. But why should it be promoted? Not because of me, but because these stories are very, very inspiring. In this sense, it makes one better understand the personality of your master, Hazrat Inayat-Khan, which most of you don't really understand. And because nobody has said anything on that chapter, which is very important. The more one understands the personality of a person, the closer one comes to that person. Now, the book I showed was the old edition, and we have discovered a lot of mistakes in it. Typing mistakes, and some words missing. So a new edition has been made, a little booklet, and it's up to you to choose either the old edition with all the mistakes or the new one which is not available. But you can put your name on a waiting list. Or perhaps the best thing is to purchase both of them, so you give one of them to your friends.
Which one?
I don't like reading. First of all, I can't see very well. But I think I would like to read exactly what is here, so that I don't make variations on the story, and when you read the book you will say, but I heard a different story. In Qatar. Hazrat Inayat-Khan was like a father to all disciples. Very interesting, very important. Was like a father, not like a symbol or a statue. A father. Of course, to others, he was the Murshid, the spiritual guide. But all, I leave some passages out, were tremendously inspired by his approach, which was always with a smile. His words communicated happiness. Their Murshid always used to say, I don't want to see any murid in my presence without having a smile on their face. Murshid used to turn an imaginary tragedy into a comedy. And he also said, he also saw the tragic side of a comedy. Is this clear? Am I talking loud enough?
Yes.
Hardly believable. Our master used to go for short walks around the block, dressed by very characteristically in a long black cloak with a kingly topi. Topi is the name for the Indian hat. And he always carried a stick, although he did not need it, which is, of course, the Indian tradition. That topi, that very special topi, was made by our mother. According to a design which my father gave himself, it was a cross model between the very noble Persian, old Persian hat and the old aristocratic Russian hat. Which our father had seen in Moscow. The shavani, that's the Indian term for the dressing, was also made by our mother. It was a cross model between the Indian and the Russian tradition. Our master was very, very impressed by what he experienced in Russia. Our master's appearance impressed so much the people of Suresnes. Suresnes is a town near Paris where the family lived, that they used to stop in the streets and salute him, although they did not know him. And whenever he went in the tram, because in those days there was no electric tram to go from Suresnes to Paris, without any reasonable reason, everybody stood up. And they did not know why. And then one heard them say, oh, c'est le roi, it's the king. But they did not know of which country. I'm leaving a lot of passages out.
Why?
One day, you know, these stories have been written down as remembrances of the old days when I was just, 9 or 10 years old. One day, Hazrat Inayat-Khan decided to go to Paris without being accompanied by any secretary or any Sufi guest. Which was usually the case. But this time he did not want to have anybody with him. And I, little boy, I felt so terribly uneasy at the thought of my father going all alone through the crowds and the terrible traffic. There were perhaps 3 or 4 cars. In that large city where one had to, of course, change from one bus to another before getting anywhere. Besides the great handicap of not being able to speak French, because he did not speak French. After lots of pleading to my father, my argument being that I could protect him and guide him. Because I did know a few words in French. I went to the French school. Finally, after a lot of I want, my father finally agreed to take me with him. And of course, I can imagine I was jumping with joy. After a very long time, we arrived at last at the storehouse called Galerie Lafayette. Do any of you know the Galerie Lafayette in Paris? And then went straight up to the textile department, where my father purchased yards and yards of cloth, all of the same color. Naturally, I was very surprised, wondering why my father would want my poor mother to have so many saris all of the same color. But I did not dare ask such an impertinent question, especially after having obtained the permission of coming to Paris with my father. And then, to my great surprise, my father carried the huge, heavy parcel all the way home, where all the rest of the family was waiting impatiently. And they all gathered around the father. I'll leave you a few passages out. Very curious to know what was in the parcel. And when opening it, our father just said, "This is a Sufi flag." But nobody understood what he meant. On the following days, to our great surprise, we saw that material hanging all across the front wall of the Sufi lecture hall as a curtain. And at that special occasion, all the Murids present stood up, wondering what this was. And again, Hazrat Inayat-Khan, pointing to the wall, to the curtain, said, "This is a Sufi flag." You know, this means much more than you think it really means. And I'm not going to tell you what it really means. But if any of you are clever, I hope you do guess what it really means. And you haven't guessed, I might tell you confidentially. That immensely significant event in Sufi history left a very deep impression in the minds of the heart and in the hearts of the Murids, who had had the privilege that day of having been told indirectly what that Sufi flag really represented. And since that day, the Sufi color has always been, the yellow color has always been called the Sufi color, as opposed to any other color. I shouldn't have said that. It's taking longer than I thought it would.
It's wonderful. You can go on.
If anybody has any questions, they will be answered afterwards. Well, I'll first start with the most important ones, in case we don't have time.
We need a table, Murshid. Yes, come.
Okay. One day, our father called our mother, asking her to come to the Oriental room together with us 4 children. The Oriental room was the room where Hazrat Inayat-Khan gave his interviews and did his meditations. It was a special room reserved in the large house. At that special occasion, our father, this is very important, I hope you remember it, because this event is so badly neglected since years in the Sufi movement. At that special occasion, our father gave our mother the blessing saying, "As of this day, you are the Pirani of the Sufi movement." And he added, "Without your increasing help day and night, it never would have been possible for me to have brought the Sufi message in the Western world." It is important for you to know this. Then, while holding our mother's hand, our father said to us children with so much tenderness in his heart, in his voice, "Children, do congratulate your Amma." Amma was the Indian word for mother. On this very special occasion, I want you, as well as the future generations, to know that your Amma is the first and the only Pirani of the Sufi movement, and to be known as such. Children, you are never to forget this as long as you live. And it is your most sacred duty to make sure that this historical ceremony to which you have assisted shall never be forgotten. And that is why it is placed in this booklet called Once Upon a Time, which I'm sure you would all like to have, instead of leaving it piling up in the bookshop. It's yours. After we had hugged our father and mother in great happiness, our father wrote down on paper the word Pirani and explained to us that it is the feminine equivalent to the Pir Murshid, only to be used by the Begum of the bringer of the message. This document is available in the Sufi Museum in The Hague. So it's not just written on paper. How much time?
Lots of time.
I hope you have guessed it is very hard for me to hold back my emotion. Each day,
Murshid Hidayat, some people will have to leave because of the element ritual training.
oh yes,
so will you please forgive
that's
them?
okay, as long as they purchase the book.
water.
Each day, we children were given a particular subject of concentration. Perhaps that's the reason why I'm being so fussy about the concentration. On subjects such as patience, my God, I still haven't learned that lesson. Tolerance, forgiveness, kindness, politeness, humility, and others. And in the evening we came to our father to tell whether or not, which was mostly my case, we had really truly concentrated on the chosen subject. One day, the subject of concentration was courage. In the evening of that same day, a dinner party had been arranged, on which occasion special guests had been invited. This being, of course, as you well understand, a great problem for our mother, especially on some very hot days during the summer school. In those days, running water came out of the tap almost as warm as if it had been heated. In those days, there was no such a thing as a refrigerator. And consequently, cool drinks could not be served. There are exceptions. As soon as the guests had been seated at the very beautiful decorated dinner table, our father asked, "Who shall go to the cellar to fetch cool water?" Because there was only one tap in the cellar which had cool water because it was in the cellar. And each one present looked at each other, hoping that the other one would be the one who would do it. Then, remembering all of a sudden that courage had been the subject of concentration that day, I jumped up and ran right down into the dark cellar while screaming to the top of my voice in order to cover up my fright of the mice, the spiders, the bugs, and the ghosts. And I felt when screaming, they might all run away. I think I'm still awake. After a lot of searching, I finally found a magic tap out of which cool water was flowing from under the ground. And when I came back with the jug of cool water in my trembling hands, my father took it tenderly from me and said, "This shall be a blessing for you during your whole life. Bayajan Guru. That means my little brother Guru, teacher. Mera beta, my beloved little teacher. And he added, that terrible experience shall remain in your memory as the happiest remembrance in your life. Because at that very moment you have wanted to vanquish your fright. Only with the willpower, which has thereby been developed in an instant. For the sake of an ideal, the ideal of courage, which had been the subject of concentration of that day.